We know that this president likes to be flattered. We know that he likes when good things are said about him. We know that he likes when, other countries and other governments go out of their way to essentially appease him. There's been a lot of that from the Pakistani side to this point. As we know, a tremendous amount of flattery, calling for President Trump to be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, all of that. So that helps Pakistan's cause in the immediate term. It ensures that Pakistan will stay in the good graces of the White House, which means that the relationship with Pakistan will be stable. But if you keep taking that approach, you set yourself up for some pretty significant risks down the road. There are few figures in any country that have more power than Munir does in Pakistan, and I think this is something that has impressed Trump.
Hi, I'm Ailia Zehra. Welcome to Dissent today. As the year 2025 comes to a close, we're presenting this series of year enders to review some of the key developments that took place in the outgoing year. This one is about the US-Pakistan relationship, which has seen a remarkable shift in recent months. And the year started with people making all sorts of predictions about how President Trump is going to push the Pakistani government to release former Prime Minister Imran Khan from prison. Some even said that the U.S. engagement with Pakistan would become conditional on Imran Khan's release. None of that happened. On the contrary, we saw that the U.S. engagement with Pakistan actually increased since Trump took office. And President Trump has had meetings with key Pakistani officials, including Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir, whom he has praised many times. So Pakistani officials seem to be very happy and proud of this outcome. But at the same time, there are some concerns at home in Pakistan about the possible obligations that Pakistan may have when it comes to this relationship. And recently, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio was asked about Pakistan's possible participation in a stabilization force that is being formed for Gaza as part of the post ceasefire process there. And he was asked if Pakistan has agreed to be a part of it.
To all the countries we've talked to about being and having a presence on the ground, I think they want to know specifically, what the specific mandate it was, the funding mechanism looks like. So we're very grateful to Pakistan for their offer to be a part of it, or at least their offer to consider being a part of it. I think we owe them a few more answers before we can ask anybody to firmly commit. But I feel very confident that we have a number of nation states acceptable to all sides in this who are willing to step forward and be a part of that stabilization force. And certainly, Pakistan is key if they agree to do so. But I think we owe them a few more answers before we get there. We're trying to make a lot of progress here.
So it seems like nothing has been finalized yet. Is this relationship now being put to test? These are some questions that people have. Joining me now to discuss all that is Michael Kugelman, who is a South Asia analyst. He's a senior fellow for South Asia at the Atlantic Council. Welcome, Michael. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, great to be here with you.
So you saw Marco Rubio's remarks, and his comments have led to a lot of speculation and concerns in Pakistan, especially with the way it was, framed. He said that I think it was pretty vague, and it does not sound like anything has been finalized yet, because he said that there are still some things that need to be discussed before countries are asked to join the force. But I think the word offer here has led to people questioning if Pakistan actually wanted to, if Pakistan is sort of abandoning any of its long-term, sort of long-standing positions when it comes to Gaza. And, Pakistan has a long history of Palestine solidarity and strong opposition to Israel, which is why people are concerned, because reportedly one of the mandates of this peacekeeping force would be to disarm Hamas, which is not something that Pakistan has ever supported. To me, it sounds like it's not finalized yet, but people are interpreting it in many ways, especially critics of the government. What do you make of Rubio's statement?
To me, it actually was not that much of a surprise, just because my understanding all along had been that Pakistan had expressed an interest in providing troops to this stabilization force, but that it was not willing to commit those troops until it had a better sense as to what the role of the troops would be. And that's essentially what Rubio had said. My understanding had never been that the Pakistanis had essentially committed to providing these troops. And clearly, there's a lot of concern about the implications of Pakistani troops being sent to Gaza and being in a position where they would have to be involved in de-arming Hamas, or where they'd have to be in a position conceivably to use force against Palestinians for whatever reason. This is something that I suspect that the Pakistani leadership would want to avoid. But this is a very unusual and I think different type of mission from a standard peacekeeping mission, right? It's an especially fraught environment. This is an especially controversial thing from the context of not only Pakistan, but any of those countries, presumably Muslim majority states that will be providing troops. So it's very complex, as you say. The position in Pakistan for many years has been that no support, or sorry, no formal relationship, no normalization of ties with Israel until there's a Palestinian state. Strong support for the Palestinian cause. If the Pakistanis were to send troops to Gaza, no matter what the role those troops would play, there would have to be some level of engagement with the Israelis, even if indirect, to coordinate getting the Pakistani troops into Gaza. That can't happen without coordination with Israel. So I think bottom line is, no matter how this plan pans out, if Pakistan does decide to send troops to this mission, that would entail, I think, breaking a longstanding policy. There would have to be some level of engagement with Israel on formal levels. I mean, if you look at the history, there isn't an interesting history of Pakistani leaders, both civilian and military leaders, engaging indirectly, informally with Israeli counterparts from time to time. And I think most famously, we remember during the Musharraf era, there was a meeting in Turkey between the Pakistani and Israeli foreign ministers. So it's a very sensitive issue. But bottom line, I think that given how much Pakistan wants to be in the good graces of the Trump administration and the White House, I do think that there is going to be that continued interest from the Pakistanis to be a part of this, if they're comfortable with what the terms of engagement would be for their troops on the ground.
Right. Up until now, we haven't really been in a position where Pakistan had to abandon any of its long held positions to maintain this renewed partnership, right? When the US attacked Iran earlier this year, Pakistan did not have to come out against Iran just because the US was against it, right? Pakistan continued to offer its support and solidarity with the country. Do you think that that's the way it is going to be, or does the US government realize the sensitivity here, that do they care that this is an issue that might lead to, it would trigger backlash for the Pakistani government at home?
Well, I don't think that's a concern for this Trump administration. As I said many times before, you don't really have Pakistan expertise represented within the White House right now. So I don't necessarily think that
Yeah,
that
but
context would
you
be
you
known.
don't have to be a Pakistan expert to know that Pakistan does not recognize Israel, right? It's not that complex. Everybody knows that, right? So will they put Pakistan in a position where it has to support Israel in doing all of those things?
Well, I mean, again, what does the Trump administration want? It's looking to get countries to participate in this mission to uphold a peace that for President Trump is very important, because it's something that he wants to take credit for, among other things. No, look, I think that the position of the Trump administration, and perhaps of Pakistan, if they decide to go through with sending troops here, is that this would not amount to anything representing recognizing Israel, right? And entails sending troops into Gaza. But as I said, there are two factors here. One is that there would have to be some level of coordination with Israel, which in of itself would be a form of legitimizing an Israeli state that Pakistan does not recognize. And also, and I think this is even more important and even more complicated and controversial, if Pakistan provides troops to this mission, I would think, just because of how things have played out over the last few years, I would think there's a very good chance that Pakistan would soon enough face pressure from the Trump administration to sign on to the Abraham Accords, right? If peace returns to the Middle East, or if relative peace returns, if the war does not resume, I think that you're going to have some countries, including Saudi Arabia, that are going to strongly consider joining the Abraham Accords, which of course means normalizing ties with Israel. And especially if Saudi Arabia does that, there'd be a lot of pressure on Pakistan to do it as well, particularly because the Trump administration has been getting all these signals from Pakistan that it wants to work with the Trump administration, it wants to help it wants to work together. And so in that sense, it's almost like Pakistan could be backed into a corner and face that pressure from President Trump to join the Abraham Accords, which of course is an initiative of him in his first administration. He takes the Accords very seriously.
Right.
I mean, I think it remains to be seen what type of reaction there would be in Pakistan if Pakistani troops would be sent to Gaza. Of course, a lot of it depends on what the role would be. If there is an expectation that these troops would be having to de-arm Hamas or anything like that, the chances of some type of physical reaction on the streets is more likely. As you say, currently in Pakistan, the climate is such that it's not easy for there to be street mobilizations. But I do think that the one exception could be mobilizations by religious hardliners. We've seen that recently Pakistan has sought to defang TLP, Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, which of course is, I think one of the groups that comes to mind that could very easily mobilize and take to the streets and be violent in their protest against this move. But for now, TLP has been banned, but that doesn't mean that there couldn't be other groups like it and others that are loyal to it that try to come out in the streets. And certainly that could be a big risk for the Pakistani state and including the military, which would be ultimately making the decision about what to do about sending troops to Gaza. But I think that if Pakistan makes the decision to send troops, I don't think it's necessarily going to be thinking about what type of response there might be on the ground. I think that the view would be that it could manage that if there were to be public backlash playing out on the streets. So in a worst case scenario, it could get quite ugly if you have violent protests against a hypothetical move to send Pakistani troops to Gaza.
How realistic do you think these expectations are that Pakistanis have from the US?
Well, yeah, I think that we may have to distinguish between the expectations of Pakistan's government and the leadership and expectations of the public. I might say that perhaps the public would be a bit more skeptical about the direction of the relationship than the government, though I would argue that, and this is based on a trip I made to Pakistan some weeks ago, I think even those in the policy community in Pakistan recognize that despite what's happening now with US-Pakistan relations, despite how good things look, things could change in a real hurry next week or next month, just because President Trump and the administration are so unpopular. And in terms of how the relationship looks right now, it's very strange, quite frankly. I would argue that it's a very personalized. The relationship with Pakistan is being pursued by President Trump and by the White House in a way that reflects personalization of the relationship. What I mean by that is, well, Donald Trump himself, the outsized personality he is, he has concluded that Pakistan is worth working with because it can provide business opportunities, particularly in the areas of critical minerals and in crypto and so on. And then you have members of Trump's family, such as his two of his sons, who are, of course, part of an American cryptocurrency company that is engaged with Pakistani counterparts about possibilities for cooperation. You don't really see, though, efforts on the part of the State Department and really any U.S. government agency away from the White House to develop a clear policy or strategy toward Pakistan. And I would argue that on the whole, the White House is really driving the policy toward Pakistan. And within the White House, and particularly because the National Security Council was downsized so much, you really do not have many, if any, Pakistan specialists in the White House, which means that
Right.
you're not going to have people that are aware of how this relationship has looked in the past and so on, which means that it's just it's a very transactional and unpredictable approach that's being taken to the relationship from Washington's side right now.
Right. So, what exactly do you think Pakistan will need to do in order to keep this momentum and not to make sure that Trump stays the course and is happy with Pakistan?
Well, I mean, I think to this point, Pakistan has actually done things very well in the sense that it's gotten the Trump administration's attention, in the sense that it's been able to depict itself as a partner. So Pakistan has really done things right in the sense that it's pitched itself to the administration as a useful partner that can help the U.S., that can help the Trump administration access the business opportunities that it's looking to capitalize on globally, including in Pakistan. And it has also pitched itself to Washington as a counterterrorism partner. The fact that Pakistan was able to help the U.S. track down an Islamic State Khorasan terrorist much earlier this year, that's something that really got the attention of this administration in a positive way. So, what does Pakistan have to do moving forward to continue this momentum? Again, What would work for Pakistan might not actually benefit over the longer term. And what I mean by that is, we know that this president likes to be flattered. We know that he likes when good things are said about him. We know that he likes when, other countries and other governments go out of their way to essentially appease him. There's been a lot of that from the Pakistani side to this point, as we know, a tremendous amount of flattery, calling for President Trump to be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, all of that. So that helps Pakistan's cause in the immediate term. It ensures that Pakistan will stay in the good graces of the White House, which means that the relationship with Pakistan will be stable. But if you keep taking that approach, you set yourself up for some pretty significant risks down the road, such as the possibility that the White House will assume that Pakistan is prepared to work with the US and address US concerns however the US would like it to. And that gets into uncomfortable questions about Pakistan providing troops to a stabilization mission in Gaza, and perhaps down the road even being asked to normalize relations with Israel. These are extremely sensitive things that Pakistan might not want to do. So I would say this. Now that's very short. The short of it is, I think that Pakistan's government will have to hope that in due course we will see we will see Washington beyond the White House, particularly the State Department, DoD, agencies of the government taking more of a lead in driving the policy, which I think will make it a more predictable policy. But at the same time, I'd argue that outside of the White House, you have a lot of skeptics, bureaucrats within the US government that do understand the history of US relations with Pakistan and have not been happy with some of Pakistan's policies, particularly in terms of how its approach during the US war in Afghanistan. So I think that it's going to be difficult for the Pakistan side to know how to maintain this relationship with an administration that is just extremely unconventional. But I just say this to close. I think at the least there needs to be a better effort to develop new areas of cooperation for the partnership that have fewer question marks, right? I mean, critical minerals and cryptocurrency, even counterterrorism to an extent. I think there's a lot of questions attached to those, and there could be limits to how far collaboration could be pursued in those areas.
Sharif of Pakistan, and also I have to say my favorite field marshal from Pakistan, who's not here, but the Prime Minister is here, and you're going to give his regards. Where are you? There you go. Thank you very much.
I think there's several factors at play when it comes to this dynamic between Trump and Munir. Yes, I do think that that is something. The fact that Pakistan was able to hold its own in the conflict with India, and it did shoot down several Indian jets. We don't know exactly how many, but several was shot down. And I think that that would be something that would certainly get the attention in a good way of the Trump administration. But I think it goes beyond that. I would also argue that President Trump, he's attracted to power. I mean, he's very I think he's attracted to leaders who are powerful, quite frankly. He's attracted to leaders that govern like Trump does, or that govern like he would like to govern. And so that means that Trump is naturally attracted to strongmen. And we know that Trump has oftentimes indicated his admiration for people like Vladimir Putin and President Xi in China as well. And I think that Asim Munir would fit into that mold, right? I mean, there are few figures in any country that have more power than Munir does in Pakistan, and I think this is something that has impressed Trump. And when Munir became Field Marshal Munir, there are not many field marshals out there. I think that's also something that really struck President Trump. So I think that's another factor. Another factor to note, and this is, I mean, it may seem sort of hard to believe. It would seem like an unconventional explanation, but this is an unconventional administration and president. The Pakistani government has hired a number of especially powerful and efficient lobbyists, and there's been coverage of this in recent months. It's retained the services of lobby groups that in some cases are run by people who are very close to Trump. And President Trump is someone who really depends very heavily on his small, tight network of folks, including some from his family. So in that sense, I think these lobbyists have been very successful and have helped Pakistan be in a position where it could get these high-level engagements between senior U.S. officials and senior Pakistani officials, including perhaps the first meeting between Trump and Munir at the White House. Fine, there's some other factors. I think it's important that it does get into strategic issues as well, right? I mean, I think that the administration sees Pakistan as a country that's really very important thanks to the current geopolitical moment because of everything happening in the Middle East and Pakistan's location, the fact that it has pretty good relations with many of the key GCC states. It's got friendly relations with Iran as well. And when Munir came to the White House in June, he had only just before that been in Iran with the prime minister. And so I think that's something that made this White House recognize that, okay, this is a mover and shaker. Not only is he hugely powerful at home, but he's doing things abroad as well. So I think these are a variety of explanations for how you have this dynamic between Trump and Munir.
Right. Do you think that this dynamic can survive administrations? Will it extend beyond this administration?
I mean, as you know, there's been a long history of the U.S. essentially privileging its relations with Pakistani's military leaders over civilian leaders. And this is obviously because of the view in Washington that, it's the military that gets things done. It's the military that drives foreign policy, in particular relations with the U.S., and that this might not be something that advances democracy in Pakistan, but it is something that helps countries like the U.S. achieve their goals with Pakistan. So, that suggests to me that in a post-Trump era, whatever government is in power in the U.S. would continue to engage with the military leader, regardless of how things look with the relationship. But as I said before, Trump takes a very personalized approach to diplomacy and foreign policy relations with other countries, which suggests that it's highly unlikely that you'd have a president that would want to cultivate this type of personal relationship with Munir that Trump wants to. But broadly speaking, this notion of engaging with top military officials in Pakistan, I don't think that would change. Now, of course, if the relationship with Pakistan on the whole essentially, drifts apart or grinds to a halt, which I hope would not happen, then you may not see that level of engagement with Pakistani military officials. But so long as there is a relationship in place and U.S. officials are keen to get things done with Pakistan, they will continue, I think, to engage with the military leadership.
How much of this dynamic do you think, this good relationship that we're witnessing now, is based on the fact that U.S. Is a little hostile towards India right now? Do you think things will change between Pakistan and the U.S. if things get better between India and the U.S.?
Yes, I do. To answer the latter question there, we don't know how things are going to go with the U.S.-India relationship, but I suspect that eventually it will improve, and it'll definitely happen with the next U.S. government if it doesn't happen with the current one. And yeah, I do think that would then limit the space. It would limit the diplomatic space for this type of U.S.-Pakistan engagement that we've been seeing over the course of the second Trump administration. And I think that thinking about Trump and how he operates, he's always thinking about transactional considerations. So I don't think we should rule out the possibility that another reason why we're seeing all this positive talk in Washington about Pakistan and all this high-level engagement with Pakistani officials shouldn't rule out that it's meant to be some type of pressure tactic with an eye toward India to essentially send a message of, okay, well, we're doing trade talks with you, we're trying to reach a trade deal, we want to get things done at the negotiating table, were things that we want you to give us, but look what we could do with Pakistan in the meantime. So the pressure tactic theory, I don't think should be ruled out here as well. I mean, as I said, there are a number of reasons why we're seeing this U.S. approach to Pakistan, but to an extent, it could come back to the India factor in that way as well. And especially when it comes to something like President Trump saying, what has it been, 40 or 50 times that he mediated the ceasefire, which of course is something that Indian officials don't want to hear. The fact that he has said he's referred a number of times to Indian jets that have been shot down. He gives a different number each time. A lot of people have been wondering, why is he fixated on these issues? It could be part of this pressure game that he's trying to play with an Indian audience in mind.
Do you also want to comment on how his approach towards India is being viewed within U.S. policy making circles? Like, they're not very happy with the way he's dealing with key U.S. allies, right? Traditionally been U.S. policy under Trump is undergoing a lot of changes. So what exactly is the view when it comes to his approach towards India in Washington?
Yeah, I mean, here I come back to something I said before that we have to distinguish between what the White House is doing and thinking and saying about the relationship with India and what the rest of Washington is doing and saying and thinking. I would argue that beyond the White House, there's a pretty strong view that the relationship with India has to get back on track. And I think that's my impression. But
Do the
given how things
Pakistanis
are,
know this?
uh, I that's a good question. I think it depends it depends what you're talking about in the context of Pakistan. Um, I think it would depend on how confident those in Pakistan are about where things are going in the US-Pakistan relationship as well. But with Pakistan, I think it's similar that beyond the White House, I'd actually argue that many in US government agencies are not very comfortable about how things are so positive with Pakistan now. As I said, you don't have much expertise within the White House. You do have within the interagency bureaucracy and so on. You have experts on Pakistan who would know about the history and about the risks of deeper partnership with Pakistan and so on and so forth. And I think that there's a view that it's much better to get the relationship with India back on track and not to try to push Pakistan away, but maybe scale things back with Pakistan just a little bit. So it's I don't want to overgeneralize here, but on the whole, I think it's important not to think that what's happening with what the White House is doing with the U.S. relationships with both of these countries reflects a broader policy consensus in Washington. Far from it. But given the political moment, you can't have people, policymakers pushing back against the White House because it's driving the policy. You are starting to see several senior posts that have been filled at the State Department and elsewhere focused on South Asia. There's a new assistant secretary for South Asia in place. If these folks are given more policy space to drive policy towards Pakistan and India, we could see some changes in the approach.
Right. We have seen traditionally there's some skepticism in Washington about Pakistan's role, especially when it comes to terrorism and extremism, and it's not considered a very trustworthy ally, right? So, how exactly is this engagement between Pakistan and the US being perceived by those quarters in the US? Are they also kind of uncomfortable with the fact that Trump appears to be trusting Pakistan, especially on counterterrorism, which has been a sensitive issue when it comes to Pakistan, right? Because there have been accusations of the Pakistani leadership actually facilitating terrorism in the past, right? Extremist groups and providing safe havens to extremist groups. So, do you think there's a concern among policy quarters in Washington and the U.S. in general about this, closeness between Pakistan and the U.S.?
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, as you know, when it comes to terrorism and counterterrorism issues, it's a very complex story with the U.S. and Pakistan, right? Of course, Pakistan has sponsored terrorists that have killed American troops, but at the same time, Pakistan has worked closely with the U.S. to go after terrorists that threaten both countries, and we saw this in terms of how they went after Al Qaeda after the 9/11 attacks. So. As I said before, you don't have many Pakistan, you don't really have any Pakistan experts in the White House now. And so that means that the White House would not have that institutional memory to be cognizant of that, the fact that there is a reason to mistrust Pakistan on some level when it comes to the terrorism issue because of what's happened in the past. And this is why, when you had this effort on the part of Pakistan to help the US apprehend that ISK fighter earlier this year, I think that the past didn't matter for the White House. I mean, the focus was on what Pakistan can do now to help the US. And there's a view that, okay, Pakistan is willing to help track down terrorists that have killed Americans. And
Yeah,
that's seen as a good thing.
essentially. Yeah,
And it
essentially, you're
doesn't,
saying that this administration is quite clueless on a lot of things, and which is working on in Pakistan's favor because Pakistan is able to just, it's able to look past a lot of things, that a lot of baggage that Pakistan has had with previous administrations, and it does not have to, explain itself anymore because of the lack of institutional memory there. Um,
yeah, so that right, that and that does benefit, that does benefit Pakistan and by extension the relationship. But beyond the White House, yeah, I mean, I think that's where you have more folks that do understand the history and know the history of the relationship, know about Pakistan's past policies toward terrorism, how they undercut American interests and all that. But I mean, even there, I mean, I think that there still would be receptivity to working with Pakistan on counterterrorism issues when it can serve U.S. interests, particularly when it comes to targeting ISK. So I don't think that there is opposition from quarters beyond the White House about the idea of the U.S. working with Pakistan to go after that ISK fighter. But I just think that there's a bit more it's a bit more skepticism beyond the White House. That said, I don't think even the White House is going to want to form a new counterterrorism alliance with Pakistan. That's not how this administration works, right? I mean, it'll want to work with Pakistan when Pakistan can help the U.S. track down terrorists that threaten the U.S. But when it comes to signing on to work with Pakistan to counter TTP, for example, I mean, there may be some statements here and there from U.S. officials that support that idea, but in terms of operational kinetic support, nothing. I don't think we're going to see anything like that from the U.S. side.
Another thing that we saw in 2025 was Indian efforts to isolate Pakistan failing, apparently, right? That delegation that visited different world capitals and they came to DC as well. We did not see any strong statements from those countries against Pakistan's involvement in the Pahalgam attack, and it does not seem like Pakistan was isolated after this May conflict. Why do you think that is? Why do you think India was not able to succeed in its efforts?
Yeah, no, I don't think India has ever succeeded in its efforts to isolate Pakistan globally, even in the neighborhood. In the case of the conflict, I think it's very simple. India did not provide any proof, at least publicly, that Pakistan was involved in the Pahalgam attack, and so that made it more difficult for India to make a conclusive, credible case to the international community that its decision to carry out strikes in Pakistan represented a retaliatory operation, that it represented a counterterrorism imperative, because the international community did not see any indication that Pakistan had a role. So that's one reason. The other reason is just because both India and Pakistan have nuclear weapons, and I think that for much of the world, there's a view that instead of sitting back and essentially supporting India's decision to carry out strikes against terrorists in Pakistan, the focus had to be on getting both sides to stop fighting so that you reduce the likelihood of a nuclear escalation. So I think it's those two reasons why India really struggled to get that broader buy-in from Washington and really the international community on the whole.
Right. Do you think that there is any interest in the US when it comes to India-Pakistan relations? And because, the two countries were very close to a full-fledged war and things got really bad in May, right? So, and then Modi threatening that if Operation Sindoor is not really over. Do you think that people are concerned?
Well, I mean, I think Donald Trump himself may take an interest in this, right? We know that he likes to project himself as the ultimate deal maker, the guy that can crack the code of these really difficult puzzles on the global stage and all that. So, I mean, he's made clear his desire to be a mediator between India and Pakistan. So, in principle, maybe he would take an interest in this. And I think there is something to be said. I mean, I don't know if this is true, but it certainly is worth noting as a possibility that, as you know, the new U.S. ambassador to India, Sergio Gore, has also been named as a special envoy for South Asia, which is a position that's never been held before. And I wouldn't be surprised if Trump envisions Gore, who is, of course, very close to Trump, if he envisions Gore as a guy who could be there from his perch in India, who could try to sort of test the waters for some type of U.S.-India India-Pakistan mediation. It would not go down well at all in India because, of course, India doesn't want any type of U.S. mediation, certainly not for someone based in India. I'm not sure if Pakistan would like the idea either if the U.S. ambassador to India is doing this. But I do think that perhaps one hope of the president is that Gore could at least explore that possibility of some type of U.S. mediation mechanism, even though I don't think that'll get anywhere. But yeah, I mean, certainly, those in Washington that focus on these things, mainly beyond the White House, recognize that absolutely. I mean, the way that the conflict ended, the way that the ceasefire came about, and then the speech from Modi soon after the ceasefire was announced suggests that it would not take much for this conflict to resume, and that's something that certainly is going to be a concern that lingers as we go into next year.
Right. In Pakistan, there was like a lot of goodwill was created after the May conflict when it comes to the military's response also, and the fact that Trump kept sort of validating Pakistan's position, that sort of enabled the Pakistani military to sort of strengthen itself, right? When it comes to the way it is operating, it's also able to sort of widen its clampdown on dissent in the country, based on the goodwill that was created. So, do you think that that is a concern in the U.S. at all? That there are human rights violations taking place in Pakistan right now, and I mean, we do have some members of the Pakistani diaspora advocating against, Asim Munir, and there have been several efforts on Capitol Hill also, but they don't seem to be going anywhere.
I mean, certainly we've seen for quite some time a lot of activity on Capitol Hill, which includes introducing resolutions and statements that are strongly critical of human rights issues, human rights violations in Pakistan, very critical of the Pakistani military, and specifically targeting Asim Munir himself. And this advocacy, of course, did not just come spontaneously. I mean, this is a product, certainly, of the advocacy of Pakistani Americans, many of whom are supportive of Imran Khan. And you have cases of members of Congress responding to constituent concerns, which is how things work on Capitol Hill. But we have to remember that the Congress does not drive policy. It doesn't do foreign policy. It's what the executive branch does. So, even the fact that you've had a number of these resolutions that have been quite critical of Pakistan, and I know this is something that's been very concerning to Pakistani leaders, doesn't mean it's going to lead to anything on the policy side, especially with the White House driving the policy toward Pakistan and wanting to try to keep things with Pakistan in a good place. The advocacy continues though, and we know it's very clear that for whatever reason, Imran Khan has a lot of support among Pakistani Americans, and that's been parlayed into some very successful advocacy on Capitol Hill. And even if this advocacy is not going to lead to anything that could result in a shift in terms of U.S. policy toward Pakistan, the Pakistani government is going to continue to be very concerned about this. But I don't see that changing, quite frankly, the advocacy, and particularly given developments in Pakistan in recent weeks, it's, I think, going to even just embolden those on the ground here in the U.S. to do even more. Not on the ground, those among the Pakistani American community to do even more to bring this to the attention of their member of Congress and beyond.
One thing that it showed us, another thing that it showed us, this whole advocacy, was that a lot of members of Congress don't seem to know much about Khan's history. That he's an anti-American leader. That when his government was ousted, his whole narrative was that there was an American conspiracy that led to his ouster. Why do you think that is? Why are they not aware? Is it because of their lack of interest in Pakistan's politics, or is it because the propaganda or the advocacy efforts by Khan's supporters are so massive that they are not able to see kind of like get facts about Khan's politics and his stance on America?
Well, I think it's a combination of very savvy advocacy, as well as the fact that members of Congress are responding to constituent concerns. Now, for sure, members of Congress do have staffers that focus on foreign policy issues, for sure. And you don't want to overgeneralize. There are many members of Congress. I think some place more emphasis on having those foreign policy hands in their offices engage with experts on the outside to try to get proper context about these things, particularly when it comes to something like Imran Khan. But let's put it this way: I think that when it comes to the issue of democracy and human rights in Pakistan, I think that many on the Hill would think that, well, what's wrong with adding your name to something that calls for more democracy or better human rights, more human rights. in Pakistan, right? I think on a very simple level, it just seems like the right thing to do. But indeed, as you say, there's always going to be that broader context that certainly is important to keep in mind. And I myself have engaged with staffers on the Hill to try to provide what I hope to be a nuanced explanation for the broader story when it comes to Khan and his travails and his own past and the things he's done and said, coupled with what's going on now, because it clearly is a very complex state of affairs for sure.